desktop environments, window managers, and related topics. In this nugget, we're going to look at the standard desktop environments that come with Red Hat Linux and their associated window managers and display managers. We'll look at configuration tools for these, and we'll also learn how to switch between them so you can decide which one you like. Finally, we'll do a little software tour to make sure you're aware of some standard applications that'll help make your time on a Linux system more productive. So let's get started. Well, let's start by talking about some definitions to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, first let's talk about desktop environments. Desktop environment controls the overall look and feel of the interface. Okay, the common desktop environments that are out there are GNOME and KDE. KDE just stands for the K desktop environment. Okay, these are the two window managers that are two desktop environments that are most commonly used with Red Hat. GNOME is the default desktop environment for Red Hat Linux. Okay, and like I said, it controls the overall look and feel of the interface. The start menu, the little taskbar at the bottom of the screen, the icons, things like that are controlled by the desktop environment. But the desktop environment works hand in hand with the window manager to really present you with a computer that you can use in this graphical way. And the window manager, what that's doing is it's controlling the way that X clients are displayed on the screen, the way they're initially positioned, how you move them, how you resize them, things like that. Think back to that last video when we looked at the X Windows system in sort of a bare bones form. Okay, we just had a black screen with an X cursor. Then we opened a window up, and that window though didn't have a title bar. It didn't have the little buttons up in the top right-hand corner to minimize the window or to close the window. You couldn't drag the window around and move it around on the screen. Okay, the window manager is what controls all those aspects of the interface that have to do just with that window. Okay, the common window managers that are out there for GNOME, the default window manager these days is MetaCity. The old default window manager for GNOME used to be Sawfish. You can still use Sawfish today with GNOME if you wanted to, and I'll show you how to switch from MetaCity over to Sawfish. For KDE, the default window manager is called KWin. Okay, so these window managers, there's other ones out there, Ice Window Manager, Window Maker. There's a whole bunch of them. And, if you have a reason to switch, if you don't like the one that you're using, or you want to just experiment, look out on the internet. You'll see screenshots and people talking about different window managers and why they're so cool. And you can make that decision again for yourself. And it's more of a qualitative, aesthetic issue, okay, more than anything. Okay, so there's some window managers that are out there, and like I said, they're working hand in hand with the desktop environment to control the look and feel of the system. Finally, there are display managers. The display manager, what that does is it's really like the initial login screen. When you see that graphical login screen, like type your username, and then you hit enter, and then it says type your password, and then it goes on and starts up an X Windows session. Well, really, that thing that you're typing your username and your password into is what's called the display manager. Okay, and we're going to talk more about display managers here in a couple of minutes. The two most popular display managers are GDM, which is like the GNOME display manager, and KDM, which is the K display manager. And by default, the GNOME display manager will start up a GNOME desktop environment. KDM will start up a K desktop environment, but you can actually change that. You can have the GNOME display manager start up your K desktop environment. They're flexible that way. Okay, and like I said, we'll talk more about the display managers in 1 second. Let's talk about desktop environments first. Okay, so the first one here, GNOME. One thing you have to know about GNOME is you must use a window manager that's GNOME aware. Okay, this is not a technical term, but what this means is that the window manager must have been written with knowledge of GNOME's built-in functions. Okay, or otherwise it's not going to work well. Okay, so MetaCity, Sawfish, Window Maker all fall into that category of GNOME aware. The config files for GNOME, global config files are in /etc/GNOME directory, and the local config files are in your home directory, and the directory is called .gnome. Okay, and there's some other directories. If you just do an ls-a on your home directory, you'll see all the associated other directories with GNOME, but this is the main one for the configuration files, the user configuration files. Same goes for KDE, okay? There's a in your home directory, there's a directory called .kde that holds the user config files for the K desktop environment. There's also a graphical user interface config tool for KDE called K-control, and we'll take a look at that when we go out to the Linux screen as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about display managers now. What is a display manager? Okay, well, the first thing is that a display manager is actually an X client. So when you go and you see that login screen, that graphical login screen, and it says, type your username, you hit enter, type your password, and so on, that is an X client that's running. All right, the default display manager for Red Hat is the GDM, the GNOME Display Manager. Okay, you can change that default by changing the shell script etc x11 prefdm, preferred display manager. I guess that's what it stands for. And in there's a variable called preferred, and you change it from GDM to KDM, for instance, if you wanted to change over to the display manager. Okay, now when you log in to this display manager, when you use this X client to log in, the display manager starts what's called a session manager. For GNOME, that program is called GNOME-session. For KDM, that session manager is kwin, and they're both in the user bin directory, kwin and GNOME session. Okay, then once that session manager starts, then all future things like all X clients that are started and stuff are all handled by that session manager is what's taking care of that. Okay? One note here, and this might seem kind of out of left field, but if you log in via Display Manager, the file in your home directory ~exinitrc is not used. This is a configuration file for X Windows, okay? But this configuration file is ignored if you log in via Display Manager. Now you might say, well, how else am I supposed to log into the system? Well, we know of other ways to log into the system. One of those ways is to log in via a console and then execute the start X command. So here I just want to compare and contrast logging in via Display Manager and logging in via the console and then typing start X. Okay, if you log in via the console and then type start X, it turns out that X Windows is a child process of the shell. Okay, so the shell is still running. You've logged in via the console, you've started a shell. Then when you start X Windows this way, though, it's really a child process of the shell. If you log in via Display Manager, like we just said, the Display Manager starts a session manager, and then from there on, the session manager handles all the X clients and so on. Okay, so the X clients that start there are child processes of the session manager. Okay, when you exit X Windows, if you log in via Display Manager, you're sent back to the Display Manager. So that login screen pops up again, and if you want to start another X Windows session, you have to log in again. But if you came this route and you logged in via the console, when you exit out of X Windows, you're still logged into the shell. If you wanted to start another X Windows session, all you'd have to do is type start X. You don't have to log in again. Okay, so that's just a little comparison and contrasting of the logging in via Display Manager and logging in via StartX. Certainly nowadays, the more common approach is to log in via Display Manager. Back in the day, or on a more primitive Linux system, you would still log in via the console and then execute StartX. And if you do that, then that .exinitrc file in your home directory is a configuration file for starting X Windows. Okay, it's a configuration file that X Windows will look at when you do it this way. All right, well, now let's move out to the Linux screen and look at some of this stuff firsthand. All right, well, the first thing I want to do here is just show you this Display Manager. So like I said before, this controls the login process. And what I want to do here is just show you some of the options that you have from the Display Manager. So one of them is to choose a language. So you can choose a language other than English. I'm just going to skip that part. Under System, you can reboot or shut down the computer. I don't want to do either of those. But under Session is where you can choose which desktop environment that you go into. So GNOME is my default desktop environment. I'm just going to pick KDE right now. I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to type my username and password. Now it prompts me and it says, you've chosen KDE for this session. Do you wish to make KDE the default for all future sessions? And I don't. I just want to show it to you for demonstration purposes, and when I'm done here, I'll just go back to using GNOME. So I'm going to say no here. And then it's going to start up the K desktop environment. And you can see the messages here. It's loading the window manager, the desktop, the panel. It's restoring session now. What this means is that when you go to log out of KDE, it's going to ask you a question. Do you want to save this session? And what that means is all the windows and applications that you have open when you go to log out, do you want all of those to be reopened the next time you go to log in? Okay, and if you do, then you'll check that box. Actually, it's already checked by default. And then all of this stuff, when you log in again, this stuff will open automatically. So the last time that I was in KDE, I had a console window open, and I went to log out, and I said, yeah, save this session. And now the console window opened up automatically when I went into KDE. So this saves you a little bit of time if you open up a bunch of applications or windows or something like that. When you go, when you're doing your work, then the next time you log in, you don't have to reopen all those applications and windows. To start up doing stuff. Okay, so here's our X terminal window, or our console window, and notice here it's called console with a K. This is like KDE's little shtick, that all of their applications start with a K. Okay, now in this console window, we can do anything that we want that we're used to doing. Any of the commands that we've already learned, whatever, we can type in this console window. It's no different than any other console window. One of the nice things I like about console with a K is that one of the things you can do is click on this little new tab here, and you'll get a new console window, but it doesn't take up an extra window. So over here, maybe I could switch over and be the root user. I could go up to the top level directory, do an ls, whatever. So in this window, I could be doing root stuff. Then I can go back and click here, and I go back to that initial console window where I was just Perry. Right? If I want to go back and be the root, I just click on this one. Now I'm back to being the root user, back to being Perry, and so on. And it just saves you some clutter on your desktop. I really like that as a feature of console. Okay, so here we are, doing our stuff here. If you look around, though, at the other parts of the desktop, everything looks basically the same like it did in GNOME. The home directory, start here, the trash can, the Red Hat start menu here, where we can set preferences and use system tools and go to the control center to set up various things like speaker volume or whatever. The icon for web browsing, for the open Office Suite stuff, all those icons are the same. Okay, that's because Red Hat has this underlying theme that it gives to all of its desktop environments by default, which is called Blue Curve. Okay, and this theme you can change and make things look different between KDE and GNOME, but basically, everything is kind of the same. They have basically the same functionality. And you can do basically the same stuff in them. They have slight little feature differences. Like I was saying, the console thing in KDE is slightly different than the basic terminal window in GNOME. Okay, so let's talk about how to configure KDE. And the way that we're going to do that is to use the K console program. So I'm going to put an ampersand on it to run it in the background. It's not K console. It's called K control. I was just thinking of the console window here, but K-Control is the program that you use to configure KDE. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we're in the KDE Control Center, and this is where you can set all these various things. So let's just go into look and feel and see what we can set here. You can see all these various things we can set. Let's look at icons, and you can see the thing that's set already is that it's the blue curve icon theme. But we can change that, and there's all sorts of other themes. There's themes you can get over the internet if you want something fancy that people have developed. Let's just look at one like the KDE low color theme, for instance. I'm going to click apply, and then let me just minimize this control center to get it out of the way. And now you can see the icons have changed for some of this stuff. Okay, and whatever, right? I mean, now instead of a red hat, it's K with a gear. The start here menu, the home, the trash can all look a little different. Okay, but it's just totally superficial, right? That's just the theme. The functionality of any of these things hasn't changed. If I click on this K down here, it still gives me the exact same menu that it gave me when it was the red hat. Okay, so superficially it looks a little bit different, but ultimately it's the same functionality. Okay, so that's K-Control. The other thing I want to do before we get out of here is I want to show you just this workspace thing. We have this in GNOME too. I haven't really talked about it too much, but I can go to different workspaces or desktops. So if I click on Desktop 2 here, I go to a different desktop. That terminal window or that console window that I had open is not gone. It's just sitting over here in Desktop 1. So if I click on 1, there's my console window. I go back to 2, and here's my File Manager window. Notice that the File Manager in KDE is called Conqueror. In GNOME, it was called Nautilus. Again, basically the same functionality, a little bit different look and feel to it. Okay, and this was open already too. This was part of my session that was saved. It saves all the windows you had open across all your different workspaces. Okay, so there's like a little quick tour of KDE, basically how you configure it. Look around and play around with it, and pick whichever desktop environment and window manager and so on that you'd like. Now what I want to do is go over and look at the GNOME desktop environment and how to configure that. All right, so now here we are back at the Display Manager screen. I logged out of my KDE session, okay? And now I'm back at the Display Manager screen. I'm just going to type my username and my password, and now it's going to take me into the GNOME desktop environment because I didn't specially check KDE, and GNOME is my default desktop, okay? So now GNOME's starting up, and just like KDE, again, we see all the same basic stuff that we saw with KDE, okay? Let me open up a terminal window, and in this terminal window, I'm going to start the GNOME Control Center. Okay, so now the GNOME Control Center is the the tool that you can use to configure GNOME. It's, in my opinion, it's not quite as nice as the K-Control the program, but all the same functionality. We can set the theme by double-clicking on theme here. You can see blue curve is chosen, but there's other themes that we can pick. You can go down to menus and toolbars, and you can say, okay, the sample toolbars. The text is below the icons in here. Show icons in menus. So when I go over here to this menu, you can see there's icons up the left side of the screen, and that's because this box is checked. If I uncheck that box, these icons up the side would disappear. Okay, that's the sort of stuff that you can mess around with. Okay. And like I said, the GNOME Control Center is basically the same functionality-wise as K-Control, but it's just operating for the GNOME desktop instead of the KDE desktop. Okay, so now what I want to do, and there's just an infinite amount of playing around that you can do. If you're interested in customizing your desktop to look a particular way or whatever, go out on the internet. There's all sorts of themes you can look at. People are proud. They post screenshots of their desktops and how cool they are and the kinds of icons they have and the way they have it laid out and stuff. And some of them are really cool, and check that out. And if that appeals to you, go ahead and download some stuff and set up and customize your desktop to be unique and the way that you want it to be. Okay, so that's the GNOME Control Center. Now what I want to do is just show you if you want to switch window managers, what you have to do. Okay, so one of the ways that you can do this is to Emacs or edit your Bash profile. Okay, and if you go into Bash profile and you set up a variable down here, you say export and you say window manager equals double quotes, and you say like Sawfish, for instance. Okay, and then I save this file. Okay, now if I type out my Bash profile, you'll see that line was in there. Oops. There we go. And there's the line that's in there. So window manager is now Sawfish. So the next time I go to log in, it'll change my window manager to be Sawfish. Okay? And then my window manager won't be Metacity, which is what it is now. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, again, this is more of an aesthetic issue or a personal choice issue. There's no real quantitative reason to choose one over the other. I find Sawfish actually a little bit clunky compared to Metacity, which is the default for GNOME now. So I'm not really going to change that. I just wanted to show you what you need to do if you wanted to change that. Okay, so that's how you change a window manager for a particular desktop environment. We learned how to configure the desktop environments. Now let's just take a little look at some of the software that's out there in the various desktop environments for Linux. Actually, before we do that software tour, there's just a couple other things I wanted to show you. One of them is the switch desk command. Okay, switch desk changes your default desktop. So if I say switch desk KDE, you can see it says desktop now set up to run KDE. So my default desktop is now set to be KDE. If I log out of the system and log back in, I'll be in the K desktop environment. And I won't have to go to the session button in the display manager and choose KDE and so on. It's just my default desktop. And similarly, I can say switch desk if I want to go back here to GNOME, so that in case I forget, switch desk GNOME. Okay, and now GNOME is my default desktop again. Okay, so this is one way to change your default desktop. Before, when we were playing around with the display manager, you saw another way to do it. If you just pick a particular display manager to log into for this session, you get prompted and say, okay, you chose KDE for this session. Do you want KDE to be your default for future sessions? And if you said yes there, that would have the exact same effect as saying switch desk KDE. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to show you. Another thing I wanted to show you is just a text-based way to get a lot of these GNOME programs that are out here in various menus and stuff. One of the ways you can see all these different GNOME programs you have available to you is type GNOME hyphen and then hit tab twice to see all the different completions for GNOME hyphen. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of programs here built into GNOME. Things like a dictionary, the control center, we already saw that one, a calculator, a terminal window. If I page down here with the space bar, you'll see the GNOME search tool and the GNOME text editor, GNOME terminal, which is what we're in right here. Okay, so if I do like GNOME search tool, for instance, you get this window that's like a search tool. It's like a graphical based search tool. In case you're not up on like the find command and on the tip of your tongue, and you want to use something graphical to do it and make it a little bit easier on yourself, well, you can use the GNOME search tool. Well, this search tool, I'm just going to close this. This search tool is also available down here in the menus. If you go search for files, you get that exact same GNOME search tool. Okay, but sometimes it's just easier to type a command than sort through a bunch of menus or icons or something looking for some particular program that you run often. You can just type it in like this. Okay, a lot of the configuration things like GNOME theme properties. Okay, this thing we got to through the configuration tools, and it's the exact same window we're seeing, but it's just for setting the theme. Okay, so like I said, if there's things that you do all the time, programs or configurations or whatever, programs that you run all the time, you can run them in a text-based way. You don't have to run them through the graphical user interface. And that's one of the things about Linux, right, is a lot of the things, once you're more experienced, you end up doing more things at the command line than you do by clicking on icons and so on. And I just wanted to show you that all these graphical tools that are built into GNOME are no different. You can run all of these from the command line. Now I just want to tell you a little bit about what these programs are that are down here in your panel. OpenOffice.org Writer, which is a word processor, Impress, which creates presentations, and Calc, which is a spreadsheet program. Let me just open up the spreadsheet program just to kind of give you an introduction what OpenOffice.org is. OpenOffice.org is a set of, it's an office suite, okay, that is sort of platform independent. Okay, OpenOffice.org runs on Linux machines, Macintosh machines, Windows machines, Solaris machines. It covers like 99% of all the computers that are out there in the world can run OpenOffice.org. Okay. The other thing about OpenOffice.org is that it mimics the Microsoft Office suite enough so that if you're familiar with that stuff, if you're good at Excel or good at Microsoft Word or something, then you can transition to these products pretty much seamlessly. I'm a mildly good Excel user. When I was a professor or something, I had to set up spreadsheets for grades. I've set up spreadsheets for some scientific experiments and stuff like that. Okay, and when I first opened this program up, it was a seamless transition. I didn't have to look at any help files or manuals or anything like that. I just set it up and used it, and boom, it was done. Okay, and the other thing about OpenOffice.org is it's capable of reading the Microsoft Office stuff. So you can take a Word document, bring it into OpenOffice.org Writer, and there it is. Okay, and then you can read other people's Word documents, and you don't have to be running Microsoft Word, which obviously is not running on Linux. Okay, so OpenOffice.org, like I said, is running on Windows, it's running on Macintoshes and Linux machines, and so if everyone's using that, the ability to share files is nice. So that's nice in an office situation where people are using different platforms. When I was a professor, a lot of people were using Windows machines, some were using Macintoshes, I was using Unix and Linux, and it was hard for us to share files. They'd send me a Word document and I couldn't open it. I had to save it or email it to some account and then open it up from my Windows machine, which was usually turned off and so on, and so it was just a pain to do that kind of stuff. If I had this available to me, OpenOffice.org at the time, it would have made that communication between people that were using different platforms a lot easier. Okay, and I would advocate this for any office that is doing some sort of cross-platform. That has some sort of cross-platform situation. If people are using different operating systems, if they all agreed on this as the base, then there's never going to be an issue in sharing files and stuff. And from the reviews that I've read of OpenOffice.org, it seems like it's pretty seamless. Like people have said, there's in the Writer one, for instance, you can go ahead and just convert a whole bunch of Microsoft Word documents over to OpenOffice.org documents. Okay, and the reviews that I've read have said those things have gone on flawlessly. All right, and so that's an advantage to OpenOffice.org, that it's trying to break into that market that's basically impenetrable, but that Microsoft has built up. But it's a way for the Linux community to reach out and say, look, like, we're trying to be compatible with you, and we're trying to work with that situation. Okay, enough of the preaching. I just wanted to give you a quick idea of how this stuff works. I'm not going to go through and show you what each of these things actually how they work. But like I said, if you're familiar with the Microsoft products, it should be second nature. And even if you're not familiar with them, a little bit of the help file here will get you started in no time. All right, well, it's time to wrap up our nugget on desktop environments and window managers. In this nugget, the first thing we talked about was what is a desktop environment, what's a window manager, what's a display manager, and then we got into looking at the various desktop environments, and we looked at the two most popular ones for Red Hat, which are GNOME and KDE. And remember, GNOME is the GNU Object Model environment, and KDE is the KDesktop environment. GNOME is the default window manager for Red Hat, but you can use KDE if you want. Remember, though, that there's a lot of other like system graphical tools to do like system administration and stuff that are dependent on that are written for the GNOME desktop environment. And while you can do all of those various tasks, just from the console, so you can use KDE or you can just do it via a console window. You don't even need a graphical environment. Sometimes some of those the graphical tools make things easier, and so keep that in mind if you're choosing a desktop environment. If you like to use a lot of those system administration tools, some of which you haven't seen yet, and I'll be showing you in future videos, then keep GNOME around, or keep using GNOME. Remember the window managers? We looked at just MetaCity is the default window manager for GNOME. KWin is the default window manager for KDE. I showed you how to switch your window manager using the window manager environment variable, setting that in your bash profile, and we set that to Sawfish so that you could use the Sawfish window manager if you chose, using something like that command I gave you. We looked at display managers, sort of how they work, what they govern, how to change which desktop environment you go into from the display manager, and so on. Well, I hope you found this nugget informative, and thanks for watching.